This podcast is not intended to provide any investment advice. The opinions expressed here by either the hosts or guests do not necessarily reflect the views of PSA, Collectors Holdings, or any of their affiliates. Any discussion of collectible values in the past or present is not a guarantee of future performance.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another week here on the PSA Pod. Ryan Green and Jack Archer, and genuinely one of our favorite guests of the show is back with us today. We're going to get right into it because we're heading into championship weekend in the NFL playoffs. When it comes to really getting into the X's and O's, intricacies of football, specific football players, Brett Kollman is our go-to. His insights benefit collectors in so many ways, as we've already seen. You can check out his work on YouTube. We'll leave a link to the channel. You'll get lost in a rabbit hole like I have on there. We'll leave the link to the channel in the description. Brett, thank you for taking the time to join us this week.
Thank you for having me on. I always love coming here.
Well, we had to have you back on this week specifically to talk about Brock Purdy. In the hobby right now, everybody has an opinion. But if you go back to when you last joined us on the show, which was before the start of last season, you very specifically mentioned him by name, kind of in passing, but it was an interesting drop. You were just coming off of a visit to 49ers training camp at the time, and we were talking about Trey Lance because he was so buzzy with collectors in the hobby back in the summer of 2022. But at the time, Purdy specifically caught your eye while evaluating the team's QBs at training camp.
Yeah, I mean, he looked really, really good in camp. They had 4 total quarterbacks there. Garoppolo was off on the side field. And so it was Lance was with the ones, and then Sudfeld was, I guess you could say, with the 2s. And then Purdy was in with the 3s. And so Purdy was getting the least amount of reps. But in every single team period, except for no huddle, oddly enough, but like in red zone and in like full team period, like Purdy was the best one on the field for them in training camp. And I was there for 3 days, and it was like that every single practice, and to the point where he came in a red zone period because and he was actually with the starters in this red zone period. It was ones-on-ones. People say he never got reps with starters, and I saw it with my own eyes. And he literally gets in there against the starting defense, which was down a few guys that day. The corners were kind of banged up at that time, but he gets in there and he throws a touchdown pass on literally the first play of red zone, gives a little finger guns to Kyle, and then walks off the field. And like he was walking around as the 4th string quarterback there. That was not guaranteed a roster spot at that point, but he was walking around like he owned the place. And I loved the confidence. I loved the poise. Like he clearly got along with the guys well. Like everybody was like, his energy was just kind of like magnetic. And it was shocking to me at the time because I saw him at the Shrine Bowl about 8 months earlier in Vegas, which I'm about to go out to the Shrine Bowl again tomorrow. And I saw him there, and it was like night and day. Like I did not think he had a good Shrine Bowl week. And all of a sudden he goes to the Niners under Kyle Shanahan with an offense that I think suits him well, and obviously, more NFL caliber talent to throw to. And he looks like the best guy on the field. So it's a fascinating conundrum, I think, in Ninerland right now, because if they win this game, not even if they win the Super Bowl, if they go to the Super Bowl, does Lance get his job back? I don't think so. It's at minimum, another camp competition. And if camp this year, which I'm definitely going to again, if camp this year is anything like camp last year, Purdy's getting more reps, like equal reps in camp with Lance, and he performs like he did in last camp. I don't know if Lance is getting his job back because this offense is just straight up better when Purdy's in it.
So, Brett, this offense is incredible, though. It has all the pieces. If you dropped Brock Purdy into like the Houston Texans, would he be impressing anybody? If you dropped Davis Mills into the 49ers offense, would he be winning 8 straight games as well? Basically, is Brock Purdy like actually legit, or just the 49ers, the system, and his fit in the system legit?
I think he's legit in this system. I think there's some offense, like you can't throw him in Buffalo and expect the same level of success, right? But in this specific system, which is a lot of play action, a lot of, work in the middle of the field. Kyle's an artist when it comes to spacing out defenses that are playing cover 3. They get more cover 3 played against them than literally everybody else because of the threat of that run game. But how Kyle attacks cover 3 specifically, and how Brock is able to quickly process things and get the ball out to the right guy. and also his mobility as well. Like people don't talk about like his running ability, not necessarily like calling design runs like he would with Trey Lance, but he has a 1.55 10-yard split, which is unheard of for not just quarterbacks, but for virtually any position. And that really shows up under pressure, like how he's able to evade sacks and turn nothing into something. And so it all kind of combines in this perfect storm of like great system fit for what he does well, plus the added mobility and poise that I don't think, Kyle's ever had in this system in San Francisco. Like there's a lot of sacks that Jimmy G would take that Brock is not taking. So they're not really going backward. And I think that all that's coming together in a perfect storm where it's the right guy for the right job. And if you dropped Purdy in most other teams, he would not be as good. But also if you dropped a lot of other quarterbacks into Kyle's system, I don't think they would be as efficient as Purdy is either. So it's just kind of what's best for everybody.
I'm a Big 12 guy, so I saw him play a lot at Iowa State, and he was always a really fun player to watch. Like that offense was a blast. But obviously in the draft last year, he dropped to the 7th round and the Mr. Irrelevant spot for a reason, right? So maybe we haven't seen them yet on this stage because the sample size is so small. Maybe the league hasn't caught up yet, but before we see them too glaringly, what do you see as the biggest kind of flaws and weaknesses in his game that, got him to where he, had him drop in the draft to where he did?
I mean, size and strength, obviously. Like his arm is just okay. He's aggressive, or at least more aggressive down the field than Jimmy G was. Not that that's a high bar to clear, but he is willing to take some shots down the sideline. But he also knows that his arm is not good enough to do it consistently, right? Like he's not driving a deep out from the far hash. That's just not his throw. He's not throwing a whole shot against cover 2. That's not his throw. But he does everything else really well. And so I think that there are certain coverages like cover 2 that you can play and probably have a lot of success because he doesn't really have the arm to beat it other than say seam routes right up the gut. But if you have a really good linebacker that can carry that seam, you can kind of completely shut him down as a passer because you really need a good arm to beat that coverage. Luckily for him, Kyle's counter to cover 2 is Christian McCaffrey and Eli Mitchell. So we won't really have to see him make those drive throws. But if I'm the Eagles and I'm trying to come up with a way to stop him, that's probably where I'm starting is we're playing either quarters or cover 2, which is what the Eagles happen to do a lot. And then trust our linebackers to run with Kittle up the middle, and then trust our defensive line to stop the run, which they're going to have to.
So, Brett, in the hobby, people love comps. Justin Herbert's best arm since Aaron Rodgers, that kind of stuff. Is there a quarterback comp that you have for Brock Purdy that you could directly relate hobbyists to potentially see where his future goes?
A poor man's Doug Flutie? Is that a good one? Like, he doesn't have Doug's arm, but everything else is pretty much there.
I mean, it works. I don't know if it's the most optimistic thing for people that are buying Brock Purdy cards right now, but it's certainly accurate, or at least in my opinion, yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, if you already have him, I don't know what kind of, I doubt anybody made one when he got drafted, right? A Purdy card, they probably were printed later.
Yeah, so it's interesting because that's what we're gonna move to next. The hobby's in a really interesting spot with Purdy because similar to last year, Panini, who manufactures all NFL cards, they still haven't kind of caught up from all the production delays and gotten their schedule back on track. So, with the 2021 quarterback class, a lot of their flagship, most sought after rookie cards didn't release until after the season ended, after the Super Bowl, and they're still in this position. So, he has a couple cards in the market, but a lot of his bigger stuff and the bigger sets he's going to be in won't be coming out until probably starting in March at least. So I guess that's a question where if you were a collector, would you look at Brock Purdy rookie cards as something that has staying power? You would feel comfortable buying and thinking this guy's going to perform and the value of these should hold at least.
I probably would say no long term. If we're looking at a short term, like I don't even know if we can speculate on price at the moment, but like if we're looking at a short term let's say they win the Super Bowl, right?
Mhm.
They're not going to draft a quarterback. They win the Super Bowl, you pick one up. And then if we're going back to camp and it's Lance versus Purdy in training camp, there's a decent chance Purdy beats out Lance. And then at that point, the price would go up again because, we're going into another season of Purdy starting. He's the established starter. He won the job. Coming off Super Bowl, like the price would spike again. That's where I would sell it. Like if you're buying a Purdy card right after this year, if they win the Super Bowl, it's to hold it for 4 months. I'm not holding it for like Jalen Hurts. When I came on before the season, I said Jalen Hurts wildly undervalued. Jalen Hurts is one I'm holding for a long time. And luckily, if people bought it at that time after that interview, they probably made a bunch of money, right? Purdy is not that. This is a short-term investment for me.
A message for all of our listeners who have Brock Purdy cards and want to hold them long-term. Brett also was all in on Derek Carr and Derek Carr cards going into this season. So he might not be right.
No, I that's the thing is the best you can hope for. And I say this as a draft analyst, the best you can hope for in the NFL draft is 50%. That is an elite GM hit rate.
Yeah.
And I kind of see cards as the same way, right?
Yeah.
You just have to hope that the ones you hit on outscale the ones you lose on. So, who knows where Carr is going? Like maybe Carr goes to a better situation, and kind of recoups some of that value. But I would have to imagine percentage-wise, because the two that I think we hit on in that preseason interview the most the three. We did Lamar, Hurts, and Carr, if I recall correctly. Mm-hmm. Lamar, missed most of the season with injuries, so we'll kind of write that one off. But I would have to imagine if you bought Carr at the price in August and Hurts at the price in August, you made more on Hurts than you lost on Carr, is my bet.
Very, very correct. And that's a really nice way to look at it. I think this football season, I think Jalen Hurts and Trevor Lawrence were probably the two biggest gainers. And then Joe Burrow continues to rise and rise and rise.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Burrow's going to be obnoxiously expensive, especially after
He already is, no matter what happens these next 3 weeks. So
how much is like a really good grade on a Burrow rookie right now?
Like a really nice. So what would we think, Jack? Like we're thinking like, let's say like the Silver Prism.
I'm going to bring up the Select XRC. We used this in the last conversation.
That's right.
Let's do PSA 10.
Yeah, that was the example we discussed in the preseason when we were playing the little trivia with the values.
So that right now is going for $1,500. In comparison, Justin Herbert is going for $900 and Tua is going for $287.
Wow.
So he's already way outperformed everyone in that class.
That's correct. Because I think Mahomes was around $1,500 before the year, right?
He might have been.
He's about the same. About $4,500. So quite a premium on Mahomes.
Yep. Yeah. And his was had a little bit of a lower print run too, a little bit of a tougher card to find with the 3-year gap. But yeah, Burrow right now, in terms of active quarterbacks, Mahomes' values are still sky high and, Burrow's essentially number 2. So his market hasn't really cooled a whole ton since the postseason run last year.
Yeah. That's insane. Yeah. Wow.
You've brought him up a couple times and for hobbyists, Trey Lance is something we got to talk about. We talked about him when we had you on back in the summer because in the summer, his cards were really hot. He was going to be taking over the reins for a very good team in San Francisco, gets hurt. What was it? Week 2, misses the season. So, he's been in the league for 2 years and you really haven't gotten a full extended look at him at all. What do you think happens with the QB situation? I know you mentioned the possibility of a competition. Is there any chance Trey Lance is just not there come training camp?
I doubt it. I would imagine, like, regardless of the results of the camp battle, which I think there absolutely will be a camp battle, I don't think they get rid of him. Like, they didn't get rid of Jimmy last year, and they had more reason to get rid of Jimmy than they had to get rid of Lance. They spent a lot of picks on him. He's still cheap. Like, he's not expensive. He's still in the rookie deal. And he's still very talented.
Yeah.
Even if he doesn't win the starting job, worst case scenario, if your objectively tiny starting quarterback in Purdy gets hurt, you can bring in Lance and keep on rolling, right? Guy who already knows the offense, who does give you some dynamic mobility, does have the arm to make throws that Purdy cannot. even if he's not as accurate and maybe as efficient, running the offense at the moment. He is objectively more talented. So I don't think they get rid of Lance. At worst, he's QB2. At best, he's QB1. And I'll tell you what, if he does come out in year 3, I think this would be, and he beats Purdy for the job in camp after Purdy wins the Super Bowl, that tells you a lot too, because Kyle's not just going to bench Purdy for no reason after this run, right? It will have to be an absolutely earned job, and that would be a better sign than anything else that Lance is starting to get to that spot that they thought he could get to when they drafted him, is if he comes out there and he beats Purdy.
If Brock Purdy wins Super Bowl MVP and leads the Niners to everything, I find it very hard to imagine that Kyle Shanahan and the management there would do anything but like roll out the red carpet for him going into next season. There's no way there's a camp battle.
They would only start Lance week 1 next year over Purdy if it is not close.
Okay.
Like, it would have to be catastrophically, or a better word, astronomically, a good camp for Lance to beat out Purdy. And so that's what I would be paying attention to. Is if he does beat Purdy, that means that it literally was not even remotely close.
But they're not going to ship him out.
If they were to trade him, though, what team would be interesting for Trey Lance and for Trey Lance collectors who might be holding a few of his cards? What would get those people most excited?
Well, I think that there's a few dominoes that are left to fall, right, in terms of quarterback movement, because we don't know where Rodgers is going, although the Jets just hired Hackett, so I bet they're trying to make a play for him. We don't know where Carr is going to go. It's very possible. Like, my conspiracy theory is that if this Lamar contract thing falls apart and they move Lamar, Baltimore's sitting there, late in the first round, which means they also have a late second round pick, and they're not going to trade Lance for a first round at this point. But, a mid to late 2 for Trey Lance to Baltimore, like, I could see that, but it's all such heavy speculation. Like, if Brady's going back to Tampa for another year, which again we don't know, maybe they throw a pick to try to get like a Brady successor in Lance. There's very few teams that I think he would immediately start that would be trading for him, but there are a couple very intriguing situations like Baltimore that if he goes there, I'm back in.
Brett, before you go, let's just play a really quick rapid fire game of buy, trade, hold. And we'll just run through a handful of kind of like quarterbacks that are relevant in the hobby right now, a lot of young guys. So let's start off with Mac Jones. Buy, trade, hold.
Considering his price probably dipped a lot this year, I would say buy. The hiring of Bill O'Brien is massive for him.
Trevor Lawrence.
Oh, buy.
Justin Fields.
Buy.
Justin Herbert.
At 900, buy.
Sam Darnold.
Sell. I hope you don't have any Sam Darnold, but if you do, sell.
Baker Mayfield.
Sell.
Zach Wilson.
Sell. God, sell.
Joe Burrow.
Buy. I mean, 1,500, like, you're already pretty expensive, but sure, buy.
Josh Allen.
Oh, God. What's the price?
Pretty substantial. In a lot of cases, more than Joe Burrow. He's dipped in the last, like, week or two, though.
Oh, man.
He's a tough one.
Hold.
Okay. That's what I thought you would have said. I like that.
Did I miss any quarterbacks, Ryan?
No, I was glad you squeezed Fields in there for me. That was a good one. That's, and we're not going to go through them by name, but, the last thing on Purdy before we go, we did talk about the 2022 rookie quarterback class when you were with us last. And, obviously what we came out of that with was a lot of names, but a lot of projects. Like, Kenny Pickett, no sure thing. Desmond Ridder, going to take some time. Malik Willis, very raw. 5 years from now, who's the quarterback from this 2022 class with the most staying power, both, as a player and, at the same time in the hobby?
And we got the 2023 kids coming up too. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you this much. All this smoke around Will Levis is real. So people got to get ready for that.
Okay. Noted. We'll be in.
And I was talking to people that have known him, since the recruiting process in high school, as well as people that knew him at Kentucky. And beyond the obvious talent, the arm, the mobility, the size, they rave about him as a person with intelligent, people. I was kind of scoffing at the Josh Allen comps at first, but hearing the stuff behind the scenes about him as a human, and his drive to be great, his intelligence, everything like that, people are just saying, wait until he gets into an actual good NFL situation, and you will see what we saw. And so the Will Levis top 10 stuff is absolutely for real. And to be honest, the Will Levis top 5 stuff probably is real too.
Wow. You've heard it here first. We like that. I mean, the 2023 class is going to be huge. So I assume when we're looking back at this in hindsight, the 2022 class there's a good chance that this could be kind of a forgotten quarterback class.
Other than maybe Pickett. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to know. We're gonna definitely want to have you back on ahead of the 2023 draft, because the quarterback conversation this year, especially once some trades start happening, some dominoes start falling, it's going to be super intriguing with potentially 3 quarterbacks in the top 5.
And probably 4 in the top 10.
Who else? Anthony Richardson jumping up there?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Can't wait. He's
got rare tools. I mean, rare tools.
This is going to be a fun draft season.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be really hard for, Tennessee's sitting there at 11. Carolina's at 9. Atlanta's at 8. I like Ritter, but, I mean, it's rare stuff that he can do. I would not be shocked at all. Jets are at 13. That's a hop, skip, and a jump in terms of trade-up scenarios. It's going to happen.
Wow. Well, we're going to have you back on before the 2023 draft takes place. Once the draft season is in full swing, Brett Kollman from the Film Room. You can see his work on YouTube. Again, we're going to drop the link here in the description so you can go take a look there. Brett, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you for having me.
And we will be back with you next week, more here on the PSA Pod. Thanks for listening.